Robert Carter stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection barely visible against the glittering New York City skyline. At 45, he cut an impressive figure, salt and pepper hair meticulously styled, his bespoke suit hanging perfectly on his athletic frame. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success, CEO and owner of the Grand Excelsior, one of New York's most prestigious hotels. But as he gazed out at the city he'd conquered, Robert felt nothing but a gnawing emptiness. He turned away from the window, his eyes falling on the numerous awards lining his office walls. Each plaque and trophy represented a milestone in his career: Hotelier of the Year, Best Luxury Hotel, Excellence in Hospitality. Yet, as he looked at them now, they seemed to mock him with their cold, metallic gleam. Sinking into his plush leather chair, Robert loosened his tie and reached for the crystal decanter on his desk. As he poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, his mind drifted back to the board meeting he'd just concluded. For 3 hours, he'd discussed profit margins, occupancy rates, and expansion plans. It should have been exhilarating. Instead, he felt drained, disconnected. When was the last time he'd felt truly excited about his work? A soft knock interrupted his brooding. "Come in," he called, straightening in his chair and setting aside the untouched scotch. Sarah, his personal assistant for the past 5 years, entered with a stack of papers. Her efficiency had been a godsend when he'd first promoted her eye, but lately, even her competence grated on him. Everything felt too smooth, too predictable. "Mr. Carter, here are the reports you requested," Sarah said, placing the documents on his desk. "Also, the Charity Gala Committee is requesting your presence at their meeting tomorrow afternoon." Robert nodded absently, barely glancing at the papers. "Thank you, Sarah. Anything else?" Sarah hesitated, an unusual break in her professional demeanor. "Sir, if you don't mind me saying, are you all right? You've seemed distant lately." Her concern caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time he'd had a genuine conversation with anyone? He managed a small, tight smile. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just thinking about some changes we might need to make." After Sarah left, Robert found himself unable to focus on the reports. Instead, his mind wandered to the early days of his career. He'd started as a bellhop at 18, worked his way up through every department, learning the ins and outs of the hotel business. It had been hard work, but he'd loved every minute of it. He'd known every employee by name, understood their challenges, celebrated their victories. Now, he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with anyone below management level. When had he become so disconnected from the very heart of his business? Robert stood up abruptly, driven by a sudden impulse. He strode out of his office, past a startled Sarah, and into the elevator. As he descended to the lobby, he felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness that he hadn't experienced in years. The lobby of the Grand Excelsior was a masterpiece of modern luxury, with soaring ceilings, gleaming marble floors, and tasteful art adorning the walls. Guests milled about, checking in and out, while staff moved efficiently to attend to their needs. Robert stood back, observing the scene with new eyes. He watched as a concierge patiently explained local attractions to a family of tourists, noting the genuine smile on her face. He saw a bellhop rush to help an elderly couple with their luggage, going above and beyond to ensure their comfort. As he continued to watch, Robert felt something stir within him, a longing to be part of this again, to truly understand the day-to-day operations of his hotel. Not as the distant CEO, but as someone on the ground, experiencing it firsthand. An idea began to form in his mind. It was unconventional, perhaps even a little crazy. But the more he thought about it, the more right it felt. He needed to reconnect with his hotel, his staff, and ultimately, himself. And there was only one way to do that. Robert Carter, Millionaire CEO, was going undercover in his own hotel. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert meticulously planned his undercover operation. He brought in only a handful of trusted individuals: Sarah, his head of security, and the board of directors. To everyone else, he would be Robert Harper, a freelance writer staying at the hotel while working on his latest novel. He grew out his normally well-trimmed beard, invested in a new wardrobe of casual clothes, and even practiced speaking with a slight Midwestern accent. As he prepared, Robert felt a spark of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about rediscovering the passion that had driven him in the first place. The night before his undercover stint was to begin. Robert stood in his penthouse, looking out over the city. Tomorrow, he would check into his own hotel as a guest, seeing it through new eyes. He felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. What would he discover? And how would it change him? Little did he know, his journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge him in ways he never imagined and lead him to a connection he never saw coming. Robert Harper, formerly known as Robert Carter, stood in front of the Grand Excelsior, a worn leather duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He'd traded his designer suits for jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his expensive watch for a more modest timepiece. His usually perfectly trimmed beard had grown out, giving him a slightly rugged appearance. As he looked up at the imposing facade of the hotel, Robert felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He'd spent the past 2 weeks meticulously planning this undercover operation, but now that the moment had arrived, he found himself hesitating. What if he was recognized? What if this whole idea was a colossal mistake? Taking a deep breath, Robert pushed through the revolving doors and into the lobby. The familiar space felt different now that he was seeing it from a guest's perspective. The grandeur of it all was almost overwhelming. The soaring ceilings, the gleaming marble, floors, the tasteful art adorning the walls. Had it always been this impressive? He approached the front desk, where a young woman with a nameplate reading Jessica greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Grand Excelsior, sir. How may I assist you today?" Robert cleared, his throat suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd checked into a hotel himself. "Hello, I have a reservation under Robert Harper." Jessica's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Ah yes, Mr. Harper. We have you down for a 2-week stay in one of our deluxe king rooms. Is this correct?" Robert nodded, trying to appear casual. "That's right." As Jessica processed his check-in, Robert found himself paying close attention to every detail of her interaction. Her efficiency was impressive, but what struck him most was her genuine warmth. She wasn't just going through the motions. She seemed to truly care about making him feel welcome. "Here's your key card, Mr. Harper," Jessica said, handing him a sleek card. "You'll be in room 1142 on the 11th floor. Thomas will assist you with your luggage and show you to your room. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Robert smiled, feeling a newfound appreciation for the staff he'd taken for granted for so long. "No, thank you. You've been very helpful." As Thomas, a young bellhop with an eager smile, led him to the elevators, Robert found himself engaging in conversation. "So, Thomas, how long have you been working here?" "Just about 6 months, sir," Thomas replied, pressing the button for the 11th floor. "It's a great place to work. The staff is like family, you know?" Robert felt a pang of guilt. Had he fostered that kind of environment? Or had his employees created it despite his disconnected leadership? "That's wonderful to hear," he said sincerely. "What's your favorite part about working here?" Thomas's face lit up. "Oh, that's easy. It's the people, both the staff and the guests. Every day is different, and you never know who you might meet or what stories you might hear. It's like traveling the world without leaving the building." As they reached his room, Robert found himself genuinely intrigued by Thomas's perspective. He'd never considered the hotel experience from this angle before. The room was exactly as Robert remembered designing it. Elegant yet comfortable, with a perfect blend of modern amenities and classic charm. But seeing it now, as a guest, he noticed little details he'd overlooked before. The way the afternoon light filtered through the curtains, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. The thoughtful placement of the reading lamp by the plush armchair. The fresh flowers on the desk, adding a touch of life to the space. After Thomas left, Robert sat on the edge of the bed, taking it all in. He'd always been proud of the Grand Excelsior, but experiencing it as a guest was eye-opening. There was so much more to the hotel than profit margins and occupancy rates. It was a living, breathing entity, full of stories and experiences. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the room, Robert felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. This undercover mission wasn't just about reconnecting with his hotel. It was about rediscovering his passion, his drive, and maybe even himself. With renewed energy, he unpacked his bag and began to plan his next steps. He was determined to experience every aspect of the hotel, from the restaurants to the spa, from the conference facilities to the rooftop bar, but more importantly, he wanted to connect with the people, the staff who brought the hotel to life, and the guests who chose to make the Grand Excelsior a part of their stories. The next morning, Robert woke early, eager to start his undercover exploration. He dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, a far cry from his usual business attire. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, he overheard two other guests discussing an upcoming charity event at the hotel. "I hear it's going to be quite the affair," one woman said. "The Grand Excelsior always goes all out for these things." Robert smiled to himself, proud of his hotel's reputation. He made a mental note to look into this event. It could be an excellent opportunity to observe the hotel's operations from a different angle. As he stepped into the lobby, his eyes were drawn to a flurry of activity near the grand staircase. A woman with wavy auburn hair was directing a team of staff members, her voice calm but authoritative as she gestured towards various points in the space. Curious, Robert approached the group, catching snippets of their conversation. "We'll need to move the registration table to the left," the woman was saying. "It'll create a better flow for the guests as they arrive. And let's see if we can get some additional lighting over here. We want to highlight the silent auction items." Robert found himself impressed by her attention to detail and the way she seemed to envision the entire event in her mind. Without thinking, he spoke up. "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you planning an event here?" The woman turned, her green eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and interest. "Yes, we are. The annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. It's one of our biggest events of the year." She extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Olivia Bennett, the hotel's event planner. And you are?" "Robert Harper," he replied, shaking her hand. He felt a small jolt as their fingers touched, which he quickly dismissed. "I'm staying here while working on a writing project. The event sounds fascinating. I don't suppose you need any volunteers." Olivia's eyes lit up. "Actually, we could always use an extra pair of hands. Are you serious about helping out?" Robert nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. I'd love to get involved, if you'll have me." "Well, Mr. Harper, your timing is impeccable," Olivia said with a grin. "We're just getting started with the preparations. Why don't you join us for our planning meeting this afternoon? It's at 2 p.m. in the Maple Room." Robert agreed, feeling a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been hoping for. A chance to be involved in the hotel's operations from the ground up. Throughout the day, Robert found his thoughts drifting back to Olivia. There was something about her that intrigued him. Her confidence, her creativity, the passion she clearly had for her work. He realized with a start that it had been a long time since he'd felt that kind of enthusiasm for his own role at the hotel. At 1:55 p.m., Robert made his way to the Maple Room. He paused outside the door, taking a deep breath. For a moment, he felt like an imposter, the CEO playing at being a regular guy. But he pushed the feeling aside. Right now, he wasn't Robert Carter, millionaire hotel owner. He was Robert Harper, writer and volunteer, eager to help with a worthy cause. As he entered the room, he knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. For him, for the hotel, and for the people whose lives were about to become intertwined with his in ways he could never have imagined. Robert entered the Maple Room, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The space was already bustling with activity, filled with hotel staff, charity representatives, and other volunteers. At the center of it all was Olivia, her auburn hair catching the light as she moved gracefully around the room, greeting people and organizing materials. As their eyes met, Olivia's face lit up with a warm smile. "Robert, I'm so glad you made it. Come on in and grab a seat." He made his way to an empty chair, nodding politely to the others around the table. The energy in the room was palpable, only a buzz of anticipation and purpose that Robert realized he'd been missing in his own executive meetings. Olivia called the meeting to order, her voice clear and confident. All right, everyone, let's get started. As you know, we're here to plan the Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. This is one of our most important events of the year, and we want to make it truly spectacular. As she began outlining the event, details, Robert found himself captivated. It wasn't just the information being presented, it was the way Olivia commanded the room, her passion evident in every word and gesture. He watched as she deftly navigated differing opinions, always finding a way to make everyone feel heard while keeping the discussion on track. Our theme this year is A Night Under the Stars, Olivia explained, pulling up a mood board on the large screen at the front of the room. We want to transform the ballroom into a magical nighttime garden. Think twinkling lights, lush, greenery, and a ceiling that looks like the night sky. As she spoke, Robert found himself transported. He could almost see the transformed ballroom, feel the magic of the evening. Without thinking, he raised his hand to contribute. Yes, Robert, Olivia said, her green eyes meeting his with interest. What if we brought in some interactive elements? He suggested, surprised by his own enthusiasm. Maybe a virtual reality station where guests can visit the Children's Hospital and see firsthand the impact of their donations? A murmur of approval ran through the room, and Olivia's face lit up. That's a brilliant idea, Robert. It would really help connect the guests to the cause. She quickly jotted down notes, then gave him an appreciative smile that made his heart skip a beat. As the meeting progressed, Robert found himself more and more engaged. He contributed ideas, offered to help with various tasks, and felt a growing sense of excitement about the event. It had been years since he'd been this involved in the nitty-gritty of event planning, and he was surprised by how much he enjoyed it. After the meeting, as people were filing out, Olivia approached him. Robert, I can't thank you enough for your input today. Your ideas were fantastic. Would you be interested in working more closely with me on this event? I could really use someone with your creativity and enthusiasm. Robert felt a warm glow of pride at her words. I'd be honored, he said sincerely. I'm here for a couple of weeks, and I'd love to help in any way I can. Great, Olivia beamed at him. Why don't we grab a coffee and discuss some more ideas? There's a great little cafe just down the street. As they walked out of the hotel together, Robert felt a sense of lightness he hadn't experienced in years. Here he was, just Robert, not the CEO, not the millionaire, but a man connecting with someone over a shared goal. He glanced at Olivia, admiring the way the afternoon sun brought out the auburn highlights in her hair, and felt a flutter in his stomach. At the cafe, they settled into a cozy corner table, steaming mugs of coffee before them. As they began to discuss the gala, Robert found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in years. He shared stories from his early days in the hospitality industry, carefully editing out any details that might reveal his true identity. You know, he said, leaning forward slightly, I started out as a bellhop when I was just out of high school. There's something special about hotels, isn't there? The way they're like little worlds unto themselves. Olivia nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. That's what I love about this job. Every day is different. Every event is a new challenge. And when it all comes together... She sighed happily. There's nothing quite like it. As they talked, Robert found himself more and more drawn to Olivia. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was undeniably attractive. It was her passion, her intelligence, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her work. He realized with a start that it had been a long time since he'd felt this kind of connection with someone. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on their shared love of travel, their favorite books, and their dreams for the future. Robert found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, carefully omitting any details that might reveal his true identity. As the afternoon wore on, Robert was surprised to find that he'd completely lost track of time. It wasn't until Olivia glanced at her watch with a start that he realized how long they'd been talking. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's so late, she exclaimed. I have a meeting with the catering team in 20 minutes. As they hurried back to the hotel, Robert felt a mixture of disappointment that their time together was ending and excitement for what was to come. Working on this gala with Olivia was going to be an adventure, one that he was increasingly looking forward to. Back at the hotel, As they were about to part ways, Olivia turned to him with a smile. "Thank you for this afternoon, Robert. Your insights are going to be invaluable for the gala. I'm really looking forward to working with you." "Me, too, May," Robert replied, surprised by the sincerity in his own voice. "I have a feeling this is going to be something special." As he watched Olivia walk away, Robert felt a sense of purpose and excitement that had been missing from his life for far too long. He was seeing his hotel through new eyes, rediscovering the magic that had first drawn him to the hospitality industry. And in Olivia, he sensed the possibility of a connection that went beyond just professional collaboration. With a spring in his step, Robert headed back to his room, his mind already buzzing with ideas for the gala. He had a feeling that this undercover adventure was going to change everything, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. Over the next few days, Robert threw himself into the gala preparations with an enthusiasm that surprised even himself. He spent hours working alongside Olivia and the rest of the team, contributing ideas, solving problems, and getting to know the staff on a level he hadn't experienced in years. One morning, he found himself in the hotel's vast kitchen, ostensibly to discuss menu options for the gala. The head chef, Marco, a burly man with a thick Italian accent, welcomed him warmly. "Ah, Mr. Harper, Olivia told me you'd be stopping by. Come, let me show you where the magic happens." Robert was amazed by the orchestrated chaos of the kitchen. Chefs moved with practiced precision, creating culinary masterpieces amidst a symphony of sizzling pans and chopping knives. He watched as Marco tasted a sauce, frowning slightly before adding a pinch of herbs. "The secret," Marco confided, "is to treat every dish as if you're cooking for family. It's not just about the recipe, it's about the love you put into it." Robert nodded, struck by the passion in Marco's voice. He realized that this was what had been missing from his approach to running the hotel. He'd been focused on numbers and efficiency, forgetting the heart that made the grand Excelsior truly grand. As he helped Marco sample various dishes for the gala menu, Robert found himself sharing stories from his early days in the industry, carefully edited to maintain his cover. "You know," he said, savoring a perfectly seared scallop, "I once had to help prepare a last-minute dinner for a group of VIPs when our chef called in sick. I'd never been so terrified in my life." Marco laughed heartily. "And how did it turn out?" Robert grinned. "Let's just say I gained a whole new appreciation for what you guys do back here. I stuck to management after that." As they continued to talk, Robert felt a growing sense of connection, not just to Marco, but to the entire kitchen staff. He saw the pride they took in their work, the camaraderie they shared, and he felt a pang of regret for how disconnected he'd become from this part of his hotel. Later that day, Robert joined the housekeeping staff to help prepare a suite for a VIP guest arriving for the gala. Maria, a housekeeper who'd been with the hotel for over 2 decades, showed him how to achieve the perfect hospital corner on the bedsheets. "Every room tells a story," she told him as they worked. A businesswoman closing a big deal, a couple celebrating their anniversary, a family on their first big vacation. "We're not just cleaning rooms, we're setting the stage for memories." Her words resonated deeply with Robert. He'd always prided himself on providing luxury, but he'd forgotten about creating experiences, about being a part of people's stories. As they finished preparing the room, Maria stepped back with a satisfied smile. "Perfect," she said. "Now, this room is ready to welcome our guest and make them feel at home." Robert looked around the immaculate suite, seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just about the high thread count sheets or the expensive toiletries. It was about the care and attention to detail that went into creating a space where people could relax, celebrate, or simply escape from the world for a while. That evening, as Robert met Olivia in the hotel bar to go over some final details for the gala, he felt a newfound appreciation for every aspect of the hotel's operations. From the bartender who remembered his preferred drink to the soft music playing in the background, everything worked together to create an experience. "You look deep in thought," Olivia said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Everything okay?" Robert smiled, realizing he'd been lost in his observations. "More than okay," he said. "I was just thinking about how much goes into running a place like this. It's pretty amazing when you really stop to look at it." Olivia nodded, her eyes sparkling. "That's what I love about it. Every detail matters. Every person plays a crucial role. It's like conducting a symphony, with all these different elements coming together to create something beautiful." As they discussed the final arrangements for the gala, Robert found himself once again captivated by Olivia's passion and creativity. She had a way of seeing possibilities where others saw obstacles, of bringing out the best in everyone around her. "You know," Robert said, after they'd finalized the seating chart, "I have to admit, when I first volunteered to help with this gala, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But working with you, seeing all the dedication and hard work that goes into an event like this, it's been eye-opening." Olivia smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that. You've been an incredible help, Robert. Your ideas, your enthusiasm, it's really made a difference." There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, filled with unspoken emotions. Robert found himself wanting to tell her everything, who he really was, why he was there. But the fear of losing this connection, of seeing disappointment or anger in her eyes, held him back. Instead, he raised his glass in a toast. "To new experiences," he said softly. Olivia clinked her glass against his. "And to new friends," she added, her eyes meeting his with a warmth that made his heart race. As they continued to talk late into the night, Robert felt himself falling deeper into a world he'd almost forgotten. A world of genuine connections, of passion for the work, of the simple joy of creating something special. And at the center of it all was Olivia, a beacon of warmth and authenticity in the sometimes cold and impersonal world he'd been living in. But as the evening wore on, a nagging guilt began to gnaw at him. He was lying to her, to everyone. The connection he felt, the joy he was experiencing, it was all based on a deception. How could he continue this charade? And yet, how could he give up the most real thing he'd felt in years? As he bid Olivia good night and headed back to his room, Robert knew he was approaching a crossroads. The gala was just days away. Soon, he would have to make a decision, continue his undercover journey and risk losing everything when the truth inevitably came out, or reveal his true identity and face the consequences. Either way, he knew one thing for certain: his life, and the Grand Excelsior, would never be the same again. As the days leading up to the gala flew by, Robert found himself more deeply involved in the hotel's operations than he had been in years. He was up at dawn each morning, eager to start the day, and often worked late into the night alongside Olivia and the rest of the team. One particularly hectic afternoon, Robert was helping to coordinate the delivery of the decorations, when he overheard a heated conversation between Olivia and a man he didn't recognize. Curious, he edged closer, pretending to inspect a box of centerpieces. "I'm telling you, Olivia, we need to cut costs somewhere," the man was saying, his voice tense. "The board is breathing down my neck about the budget for this gala." Olivia stood her ground, her green eyes flashing with determination. "And I'm telling you, Richard, that cutting corners now will only hurt us in the long run. This gala is our chance to showcase what the Grand Excelsior is truly capable of." Robert's ears perked up at the mention of the board. He'd completely forgotten about the financial pressures the hotel was under, too caught up in the day-to-day preparations. "We can't afford to go all out like this," Richard argued. "Times are tough, and we need to be practical." "Being practical is what's holding us back," Olivia countered. "We need to remind people why the Grand Excelsior is special. This gala could be the turning point we need." As Richard stormed off, Robert approached Olivia, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Just some internal politics," she said, forcing a smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Robert could see the worry in her eyes. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, ignoring the spark of electricity he felt at the touch. "Hey, if there's anything I can do to help, just say the word. We're in this together, remember?" Olivia's smile became more genuine as she looked up at him. "Thanks, Robert. You have no idea how much your support means to me." As they went back to work, Robert's mind was racing. He'd had no idea the hotel was facing financial difficulties. Had he been so out of touch that he'd missed the signs? Or had his management team been keeping things from him? Over the next few days, Robert paid closer attention to the conversations around him, picking up bits and pieces of information. The hotel's occupancy rates had been declining steadily over the past year. Several high-profile corporate clients had switched to newer, trendier hotels. The restaurant was struggling to compete with the hot new eateries popping up around the city. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The Grand Excelsior, his life's work, was in trouble, and he'd been too caught up in his own success to notice. Determined to do something, Robert threw himself into the gala preparations with renewed vigor. He worked tirelessly alongside the staff, offering ideas, solving problems, and doing whatever was needed to make the event a success. One evening, as he and Olivia were going over the final guest list, Robert noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the slump in her shoulders. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. "Olivia," he said softly, "you're working yourself to the bone. Why don't we take a break, get some fresh air?" She looked like she was about to protest, but then nodded, offering him a tired smile. "You're right, I could use a breather." They made their way to the hotel's rooftop garden, a hidden gem that Robert had insisted on including when he'd renovated the building years ago. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Olivia gasped softly. "Oh, Robert, this is beautiful," she breathed, taking in the twinkling lights strung between potted trees and the stunning view of the city skyline. Robert smiled, pleased by her reaction. "It's one of my favorite spots in the whole hotel," he said, forgetting for a moment that he wasn't supposed to know every inch of the building. If Olivia noticed his slip, she didn't comment on it. Instead, she walked to the railing, looking out over the city. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes I wonder if all this effort is worth it, if we're fighting a losing battle." Robert moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body. "What do you mean?" Olivia sighed. "The hotel, it's struggling. This gala, it's not just about raising money for the children's hospital. It's about proving that the Grand Excelsior still has what it takes to compete in this city." Robert felt a pang of guilt. He should have known this, should have been the one leading the charge to save his hotel. Instead, he'd been blind to its struggles, leaving people like Olivia to fight these battles alone. "The Grand Excelsior is special," he said firmly. "It has a heart and a soul that these newer hotels can't match. We just need to remind people of that." Olivia turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "We," she repeated softly. Robert realized his mistake too late. He'd revealed too much of his attachment to the hotel. Scrambling to cover, he said, "I mean, you and the team. I've come to care about this place, working, with all of you." Olivia's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. "I'm glad you feel that way, Robert. Having you here, your support and your ideas, it's made all the difference." As they stood there, hand in hand, looking out over the city, Robert felt a surge of determination. He would save this hotel, not just as its owner, but as someone who truly understood its value. And he would do it with Olivia by his side. But first, he had to get through the gala. And as the big night approached, Robert knew that everything was about to change. The night of the gala arrived in a whirlwind of last-minute preparations and nervous energy. Robert had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with everything that needed to be done and the weight of the secrets he was carrying. As he adjusted his bow tie in the mirror of his hotel room, Robert hardly recognized himself. Gone was the aloof CEO who viewed his hotel as just another business asset. In his place stood a man who had rediscovered his passion, who understood the true value of what he had created. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Olivia standing there, looking breathtaking in a midnight blue gown that seemed to shimmer with every movement. "Wow," Robert breathed, momentarily forgetting himself. "You look incredible." Olivia blushed slightly, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Harper," she teased. Then, more seriously, "Are you ready for this?" Robert took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said, offering her his arm. "Shall we?" As they made their way to the ballroom, Robert marveled at the transformation. The space had been turned into a breathtaking nocturnal garden, with twinkling lights cascading from the ceiling like stars and lush greenery adorning every surface. The projection-mapped ceiling showed a slowly moving night sky, complete with shooting stars that would coincide with key moments in the evening. Guests were already arriving, a mix of New York's elite, hospital staff, and families who had been helped by the Children's Hospital. Robert watched as Olivia effortlessly worked the room, greeting people, solving last-minute issues, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. As the evening progressed, Robert found himself caught up in the magic of the event. He chatted with guests, shared laughs with the staff, and even managed to secure a few sizable donations for the hospital. But through it all, his eyes kept returning to Olivia, drawn to her warmth and vitality. Midway through the evening, as the dance floor filled with couples swaying to the soft jazz being played by the live band, Robert spotted a group of stern-looking men in expensive suits entering the ballroom. With a jolt, he recognized them as executives from Platinum Hospitality, a large corporation known for buying out struggling hotels and turning them into soulless, cookie-cutter establishments. Panic gripped him. What were they doing here? Had the board invited them without his knowledge? He watched as they made their way through the crowd, their eyes surveying the room with a calculating gaze. Robert's mind raced. He had to do something, had to stop them before they could make any moves on his hotel. But how? He was supposed to be Robert Harper, freelance writer, not Robert Carter, hotel owner. As he debated his options, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Olivia looking at him with concern. "Robert, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He opened his mouth to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. In that moment, looking into her worried eyes, Robert knew he couldn't keep lying. Not to her, not to himself, not anymore. "Olivia," he said softly, taking her hand. "There's something I need to tell you, but not here. Can we go somewhere private?" Confusion flickered across her face, but she nodded. Of course. The rooftop garden. As they made their way through the crowded ballroom, Robert's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. He was about to risk everything. His undercover mission, his reconnection with the hotel, and most importantly, his budding relationship with Olivia. The cool night air hit them as they stepped out onto the rooftop. The city sprawled. Out before them, a glittering tapestry of lights. For a moment, they stood in silence, the muffled sounds of the gala drifting up from below. "Olivia," Robert began, his voice thick with emotion. "These past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, they've been the most real, the most alive I've felt in years." Olivia's brow furrowed. "Robert, what's going on? You're scaring me." He took a deep breath. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. About who I am. About why I'm here." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, taking a step back. Robert closed his eyes for a moment, steeling himself. When he opened them, he looked directly into Olivia's eyes. "My name isn't Robert Harper. It's Robert Carter. I'm the owner of the Grand Excelsior." Olivia's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. "What? But how? Why?" The words tumbled out of Robert in a rush. He told her everything. His growing disconnection from the hotel, his decision to go undercover, his rediscovery of his passion for hospitality, and most importantly, how meeting her had changed everything. "I never meant to deceive you," he finished, his voice pleading. I got caught up in it all. In being just Robert, in working alongside you, in falling in." He caught himself, but it was too late. Olivia's eyes flashed with a mix of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite read. "Falling in what, Robert?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert took a step towards her, his heart in his throat. "Falling in love with you," he said softly. For a long moment, Olivia just stared at him, her face unreadable. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back into the hotel, leaving Robert alone on the rooftop, the weight of his revelations hanging heavy in the air. As he watched her go, Robert knew that everything had changed. The truth was out, for better or worse. Now, he had to face the consequences of his actions, not just with Olivia, but with his entire hotel. And as he heard the sound of laughter and music drifting up from the gala below, Robert realized that his real work was just beginning. The morning after the gala dawned bright and clear, but Robert felt anything but sunny. He'd barely slept, tossing and turning as he replayed his conversation with Olivia over and over in his mind. The hurt and betrayal in her eyes haunted him. As he dragged himself out of bed and got dressed, Robert knew he couldn't hide in his room any longer. He had a hotel to run, a staff to face, and a mess of his own making to clean up. The lobby was bustling with activity as he stepped out of the elevator. Staff members were dismantling decorations from the gala, guests were checking out, and the normal rhythm of hotel life continued. But as Robert made his way across the marble floor, he noticed the whispers and sidelong glances. Word of his true identity had clearly spread. He approached the front desk, where Jessica, the young woman who had checked him in what felt like a lifetime ago, was working. Her eyes widened as she saw him coming. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice a mixture of respect and uncertainty. Robert offered her a small smile. "Good morning, Jessica, and please, it's still just Robert." He could see the questions in her eyes, the confusion about how to interact with him now. It was a stark reminder of the divide he'd created between himself and his staff, a divide he was now determined to bridge. "Jessica," he said gently, "I know this is all a bit strange, but I want you to know that nothing has changed. I'm still the same person you've been working with these past weeks. I just have a different job title than you thought." Jessica nodded slowly, a hint of a smile appearing on her face. "I understand, Sir Robert, and for what it's worth, it's been really great having you down here with us." Her words warmed him, giving him a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't ruined everything. As he made his way through the hotel, Robert stopped to talk with as many staff members as he could. He answered questions, addressed concerns, and most importantly, listened. He heard stories of long hours and tight budgets, of creative solutions to guest problems, and small acts of kindness that made the Grand Excelsior special. By lunchtime, Robert felt both exhausted and invigorated. He'd connected more with his staff in these few hours than he had in years, but there was still one conversation he was dreading, one person he hadn't seen all morning. Olivia. Taking a deep breath, Robert made his way to her office. He knocked softly on the door, his heart pounding. "Come in," Olivia's voice called on, sounding tired and distant. Robert stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Olivia was sitting behind her desk, surrounded by paperwork from the gala. She looked up as he entered, her green eyes guarded. "Olivia?" Robert began, his voice soft. Save it, Robert," Olivia cut him off, holding up a hand. "Or should I call you Mr. Carter now?" The coldness in her voice felt like a physical blow. Robert sank into the chair across from her desk, suddenly feeling very small. "Olivia, please," he said. "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. But everything I told you last night was true, about how I feel, about what working with you has meant to me." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes studying his face. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and controlled. "Do you have any idea how foolish I feel? I trusted you, Robert. I opened up to you. I thought we had something real." "We did," Robert insisted. "We do. Olivia, the man you got to know these past weeks, that's the real me. More real than the CEO I'd become." Olivia shook her head, a sad smile on her face. "But that's just it, Robert. You are the CEO. You can't just pretend that part of you doesn't exist." Her words hit home, and Robert realized she was right. He couldn't simply discard his responsibilities as owner of the Grand Excelsior. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to blend the two sides of himself. "You're right," he admitted. "I can't change who I am or my position. But I can change how I approach it. Olivia, these past weeks have reminded me why I fell in love with this industry in the first place. The connections, the small moments that make a guest stay special, the teamwork that goes into creating Something magical. I don't want to lose that. Olivia's expression softened slightly. And what does that mean, practically speaking? Robert leaned forward, his eyes earnest. It means I want to be a different kind of CEO. One who's involved, who understands what's happening on the ground. I want to work alongside my staff, not above them, and I want to do it with you by my side. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to create a new position, director of guest and staff experience, someone to be the heart of the hotel, to ensure we never lose sight of what really matters. And I want that someone to be you. For a long moment, Olivia just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she shook her head. Robert, I need time. This is all too much. Too fast. I need to think. Robert nodded, his heart sinking but understanding her hesitation. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. As he stood to leave, Olivia's voice stopped him. Robert, for what it's worth, I'm glad you found what you were looking for. He turned back to her, a small smile on his face. I found so much, more than I ever expected. As Robert left Olivia's office, he knew he had a long road ahead of him. Rebuilding trust, both with Olivia and with his staff, would take time. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly passionate about the future of the Grand Excelsior. And as he walked through the lobby, exchanging smiles and nods with his staff, Robert knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, for him, for Olivia, and for the hotel he loved. The weeks following the gala were a whirlwind of activity for Robert. With his true identity revealed, he threw himself into the day-to-day operations of the hotel with renewed vigor. He was determined to prove to his staff, and to Olivia, that his transformation was genuine. Robert started each day by joining the morning staff meeting, something he hadn't done in years. He listened intently as department heads discussed the day's challenges and triumphs, offering input when asked, but mostly just absorbing the rhythm of the hotel's daily life. One morning, as the meeting was wrapping up, Thomas, the young bellhop Robert had befriended during his undercover stint, raised his hand hesitantly. Mr. Carter, he began, his voice nervous but determined. I had an idea I wanted to share. Robert smiled encouragingly. Go ahead, Thomas, and please. It's still just Robert. Thomas nodded, gaining confidence. Well, I've noticed that a lot of our guests are interested in the history of the hotel and the city. I was thinking, maybe we could offer guided tours. I've been reading up on New York's history, and I'd love to share that with our guests. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Robert. In the past, such a suggestion from a junior staff member might have been dismissed or lost in bureaucratic red tape. But Robert's face lit up with enthusiasm. Thomas, that's a brilliant idea, he said warmly. Let's set up a meeting to discuss how we can make this happen. I think it could be a great addition to our guest experience. The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a buzz of excitement. As the meeting broke up, Robert could hear staff members discussing Thomas's idea, building on it and suggesting ways to implement it. This, Robert realized, was what he'd been missing. The energy, the creativity, the sense of everyone, working together towards a common goal. He'd forgotten how invigorating it could be. As the days passed, Robert made a point of working alongside different departments, rolling up his sleeves and getting his hands dirty. He helped the housekeeping staff turn over rooms, assisted the kitchen during a busy lunch service, and even manned the front desk for a few hours. Each experience gave him new insights into the challenges his staff faced daily and the ingenious ways they overcame them. He found himself filled with a newfound respect for the people who made the Grand Excelsior run smoothly. But even as Robert reconnected with his hotel and his staff, there was still a piece missing. Olivia had been keeping her distance, their interactions limited to brief, professional exchanges. The loss of her warmth and companionship left an ache in Robert's heart. One afternoon, about a month after the gala, Robert was helping to set up for a corporate event in one of the smaller ballrooms when he saw Olivia enter. She was deep in conversation with the client, her face animated as she described her vision for the space. Robert paused in his work, unable to take his eyes off her. Even from across the room, he could feel the passion and energy radiating from her. This was Olivia in her element, and she was magnificent. As if sensing his gaze, Olivia looked up, her eyes meeting his across the room. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, to Robert's surprise, Olivia offered him a small smile before turning back to her client. That smile, as brief as it was, gave Robert hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to rebuild what they'd had. Later that evening, as Robert was reviewing some financial reports in his office, there was a knock at the door. He looked up to see Olivia standing in the doorway, a tentative expression on her face. "Do you have a moment?" she asked softly. Robert's heart leapt. "For you. Always," he said, gesturing for her to come in. Olivia sat down across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "I've been watching you these past few weeks," she said. "The way you've been with the staff, how involved you've become in the day-to-day operations. It's been impressive." Robert felt a glimmer of hope. "I meant what I said, Olivia. About wanting to be a different kind of CEO, about reconnecting with what makes this place special." Olivia nodded slowly. "I can see that. And I've been thinking about your offer, the Director of Guest and Staff Experience position." Robert held his breath, afraid to hope. "And I'm interested," Olivia said, a small smile playing on her lips. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Robert said eagerly. "First, I want full autonomy in developing and implementing programs to improve both guest and staff experiences. No micromanaging." Robert nodded. "Absolutely. Your expertise is one of the reasons I want you in this role." "Second," Olivia continued, her voice softening slightly, "I want us to take things slow, professionally and personally. I still have feelings for you, Robert. But trust takes time to rebuild." Robert's heart soared at her words. "I understand completely," he said softly. "We'll take it one day at a time." Olivia's smile widened. "In that case, Mr. Carter, I believe we have a deal." As they shook hands, sealing their new professional partnership, Robert felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was where he was meant to be, working alongside Olivia to make the Grand Excelsior truly grand again. The next few months were a period of transformation for the hotel. Under Olivia's guidance, they implemented a series of changes aimed at enhancing both guest and staff experiences. They introduced Thomas's historical tours, which quickly became a popular attraction. They revamped the employee training program, emphasizing the importance of personalized service and attention to detail. Robert and Olivia worked closely together, their professional relationship deepening even as they cautiously explored the personal connection between them. There were long nights spent brainstorming ideas, shared laughter over coffee in the staff room, and quiet moments of understanding as they faced the challenges of rejuvenating the hotel. Slowly but surely, the Grand Excelsior began to regain its former glory. Occupancy rates climbed, positive reviews poured in, and there was a new energy among the staff. The hotel was becoming more than just a luxury establishment. It was becoming a home away from home for guests and a family for its employees. As Robert stood in the lobby one evening, watching guests check in and staff members go about their duties with genuine smiles, he felt a warmth spread through his chest. This was what he'd been searching for all along. Not just success, but purpose. A sense of belonging and connection. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Olivia, her green eyes twinkling as she surveyed the scene. "We did it," she said softly, slipping her hand into his. Robert squeezed her hand gently, marveling at how right it felt. "We're just getting started," he replied, his voice full of promise. As they stood there, hand in hand, Robert knew that this was more than just a new chapter for the Grand Excelsior. It was a new beginning for him, for Olivia, and for the family they'd created within these walls. And he couldn't wait to see where this journey would take them next. As the months passed, the Grand Excelsior continued to flourish under Robert and Olivia's joint leadership. The hotel buzzed with a renewed energy. Staff morale was at an all-time high, and guest satisfaction scores were consistently climbing. However, their journey was not without its challenges. One crisp autumn morning, Robert arrived at the hotel to find the lobby in chaos. A burst pipe had flooded several rooms on the third floor, and guests were being hastily relocated. As he stepped off the elevator, he saw Olivia in the thick of it, directing staff and reassuring upset guests with calm efficiency. "Robert," she called out, relief evident in her voice. "We've got a situation here." He quickly joined her, rolling up his sleeves. "What do you need me to do?" For the next several hours, Robert worked alongside his staff, helping to move luggage, coordinate with maintenance, and personally apologize to each affected guest. He was struck by how seamlessly everyone worked together, from the housekeeping staff to the front desk agents. This, he realized, was the result of the culture they'd been building, a team that could handle any crisis with grace and professionalism. As the last guest was settled into a new room, Robert found himself in a quiet corridor with Olivia. Both were disheveled and tired, but there was a spark of pride in Olivia's eyes. "You know," she said, leaning against the wall, "a year ago, this kind of situation would have been a disaster. But today, we handled it like pros." Robert nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's all thanks to the systems you've put in place, Olivia. The staff training, the crisis management protocols, it's made all the difference." Olivia shook her head, her hand finding his. "Not just me, Robert. Us. We did this together." The warmth of her touch sent a thrill through him, a reminder of the growing closeness between them. They'd been taking things slow, rebuilding trust and exploring their connection both personally and professionally. Moments like this, in the aftermath of a crisis averted, made Robert realize how far they'd come. As they made their way back to the lobby, Robert's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It was Richard, the financial director who had been skeptical of their new approach. "Robert." Richard's voice was tense. "We need to talk. The board is calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. They're concerned about some of the recent changes." Robert felt a knot form in his stomach. He'd been so focused on improving the guest and staff experience that he'd perhaps neglected to keep the board fully informed. "I'll be there," he said. Ending the call, Olivia, noting his expression, raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Board meeting this afternoon. Apparently, they have some concerns about our recent changes." Olivia's face fell. "Do you want me to come with you?" Robert shook his head. "No, I need to handle this. But maybe we could have dinner tonight, to discuss strategy moving forward." A small smile played on Olivia's lips. "Dinner sounds perfect." As Robert made his way to the board meeting that afternoon, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. He knew the changes they'd implemented were right for the hotel, but convincing a group of profit-focused board members might be a challenge. The meeting was tense from the start. Richard presented a series of charts showing increased operational costs and a temporary dip in profits. The board members exchanged worried glances. Mr. Carter, the board chairman, a stern-faced man named Harold, began. "While we appreciate your hands-on approach lately, we're concerned about the direction the hotel is taking. These additional staff training programs, the new guest experiences, they're all very costly." Robert took a deep breath, reminding himself of all they'd achieved. "I understand your concerns," he began, his voice steady. "But I assure you, these changes are an investment in our future. Yes, there have been some increased costs in the short term, but we're already seeing the benefits." He went on to present his own data, the dramatic increase in guest satisfaction scores, or the uptick in repeat bookings, and the growing buzz about the Grand Excelsior in the hospitality industry. "We're not just running a hotel," Robert continued, passion evident in his voice. "We're creating experiences, building loyalty, and setting ourselves apart in a crowded market. This is how we ensure long-term success." The board members listened, some nodding thoughtfully, others still looking skeptical. Harold leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Robert. And you're certain this approach will yield financial results? Robert met his gaze steadily. I stake my reputation on it. After a long moment, Harold nodded. Very well, Mr. Carter. We'll give your strategy more time, but we'll be watching the numbers closely. As Robert left the meeting, he felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. He'd bought them more time, but he knew they needed to prove that their approach could deliver financial results as well as intangible benefits. That evening, as he and Olivia sat in a quiet corner of the hotel's restaurant, Robert filled her in on the board meeting. Olivia listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. We need to find a way to quantify the impact of our changes, she said finally. Show them in dollars and cents how our approach is benefiting the hotel. Robert nodded, reaching across the table to take her hand. Exactly. And I can't think of anyone better to help me do that than you. As they began to brainstorm ideas, Robert was struck once again by how well they worked together. Olivia's creativity and insight perfectly complemented his business acumen. Together, they were a formidable team. As the evening wore on, their conversation drifted from work to more personal topics. They shared stories from their past, dreams for the future, and quiet moments of understanding. The candlelight flickered between them, casting a warm glow on Olivia's face, and Robert felt his heart swell with emotion. Olivia, he said softly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I want you to know, my feelings for you have only grown stronger. You're not just my partner in running this hotel. You're the person I want to share everything with. Olivia's eyes shimmered in the candlelight. Oh, Robert, she whispered. I feel the same way. As they leaned across the table, their lips meeting in a soft, tender kiss, Robert knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Grand Excelsior wasn't just being reborn. It was the backdrop to their own love story, one that was only just beginning. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity for Robert and Olivia. They threw themselves into the challenge of proving the value of their new approach, working tirelessly to implement changes and measure their impact. They introduced a comprehensive data tracking system, measuring everything from guest satisfaction to staff retention rates. They launched a series of targeted marketing campaigns, highlighting the Grand Excelsior's unique blend of luxury and personalized service. And they continued to innovate, always looking for new ways to enhance the guest experience. One of their most successful initiatives was the Grand Experiences program. Inspired by Thomas's historical tours, they developed a series of curated experiences that showcased the best of New York City. Guests could book private art gallery tours, enjoy exclusive performances at Broadway shows, or even take cooking classes with renowned local chefs. The program was an instant hit, attracting a new clientele of discerning travelers looking for more than just a place to sleep. It also generated significant additional revenue, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by the board. As winter turned to spring, Robert and Olivia found themselves preparing for another board meeting. This time, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. Robert stood at the head of the conference table, Olivia by his side, as they presented their results. The room was silent as they walked the board through chart after chart, each one showing clear, measurable improvements. As you can see, Robert concluded, our occupancy rates are up 15% year over year. Our average daily rate has increased by 12%, and our guest satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. But perhaps most importantly, our staff turnover rate has decreased by 30%, saving us significant costs in recruitment and training. Harold, the board chairman who had been so skeptical 6 months ago, leaned forward, an impressed look on his face. Oh, these are remarkable results. Mr. Carter, Ms. Bennett, you've more than delivered on your promises. Olivia smiled, her hand finding Robert's under the table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but the real credit goes to our incredible staff. They've embraced these changes and gone above and beyond to make them work. As the meeting concluded, with the board giving their full support to continue their initiatives, Robert felt a surge of pride. They had done it. They had proven that running a hotel with heart could also be good for the bottom line. Leaving the boardroom, Robert turned to Olivia, his eyes shining. We did it, he said softly, pulling her into a hug. Olivia laughed, her joy infectious. We sure did. But you know what? This is just the beginning. And she was right. Over the next year, the Grand Excelsior continued to flourish. It regained its place as one of New York's premier luxury hotels, but with a warmth and personality that set it apart from its competitors. The hotel became known not just for its opulent surroundings, but for the genuine care and attention given to each guest. From the doorman who remembered returning guests by name to the concierge who went above and beyond to fulfill unusual requests. Every staff member embodied the spirit of true hospitality. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in Robert himself. Gone was the aloof CEO, disconnected from the day-to-day operations of his hotel. In his place was a leader who knew every department, who could often be found chatting with guests in the lobby or rolling up his sleeves to help during busy periods. And through it all, Olivia was by his side. Their personal relationship had blossomed alongside their professional one, growing deeper and stronger with each passing day. They were partners in every sense of the word, their love for each other intertwined with their shared passion for the Grand Excelsior. One evening, as they stood on the rooftop garden overlooking the city, Robert turned to Olivia. The setting sun cast a golden glow over her face, and he was struck once again by how beautiful she was, both inside and out. You know, he said, taking her hand in his. A year ago, I came up here feeling lost and disconnected. I never could have imagined where that decision to go undercover would lead me. Olivia squeezed his hand, her green eyes sparkling. It led you back to yourself, and to me. Robert nodded, his heart full of emotion. Olivia, you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've reminded me of why I fell in love with this industry in the first place. You've challenged me, supported me, and loved me, and I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. As understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes, Robert dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Olivia Bennet, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in life, in love, and in creating magic for every person who walks through the doors of the Grand Excelsior? Tears sparkled in Olivia's eyes as she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Robert. Yes, to all of it. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to embrace her, Robert felt a sense of completeness he'd never known before. He had found his purpose, his passion, and the love of his life, all within the walls of the Grand Excelsior. The hotel stood tall against the New York skyline, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight. Inside, a family of staff and guests continued to create memories and experiences. And on the rooftop, Robert and Olivia held each other close, looking out over the city they loved, ready to write the next chapter of their grand adventure together. 5 years had passed since that magical evening on the rooftop, and the Grand Excelsior had blossomed into something truly extraordinary. As the early morning sun painted the New York skyline in hues of gold and pink, Robert stood at the window of the penthouse suite, cradling a cup of coffee and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The sound of soft footsteps behind him made him turn. Olivia approached, her auburn hair tousled from sleep, a gentle smile on her face. "Good morning, love," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind and resting her chin on his shoulder. "What's got you up so early?" Robert leaned into her embrace, savoring the warmth of her presence. "Just thinking about how far we've come," he replied, gesturing to the bustling city below. 5 years ago, I was lost in all of that. Now, I feel like I've found my place in the world," Olivia hummed in agreement. "We've built something beautiful here, haven't we?" And indeed they had. Under their joint leadership, the Grand Excelsior had become renowned not just for its luxury, but for its heart. The hotel had won numerous awards for its innovative guest experiences, its commitment to sustainability, and its employee satisfaction rates. But more than that, it had become a true home for both its staff and its guests. The Grand Experiences program had expanded, now offering unique adventures in cities around the world where they had opened new properties. The employee development program they'd started had blossomed, with many staff members rising through the ranks to take on leadership positions. Their community outreach initiatives had grown, turning the Grand Excelsior into a pillar of support for local charities and schools. But perhaps the most significant change was in the culture of the hotel itself. There was a warmth, a sense of family that permeated every interaction, from the doorman's cheerful greeting to the personalized touches in each room. Every aspect of the hotel reflected the love and care that Robert and Olivia had poured into it. As they stood there, looking out over the city they both loved, a cry from the next room broke the peaceful moment. Olivia chuckled. "Sounds like someone's awake," she said, pressing a kiss to Robert's cheek before heading to the nursery. Robert followed, his heart swelling as he watched Olivia lift their 6-month-old daughter, Sophie, from her crib. This, he thought, was the greatest gift the Grand Excelsior had given him. Not just a renewed sense of purpose, but a family and a home. As Olivia settled into a rocking chair to feed Sophie, Robert perched on the arm, gently stroking his daughter's soft hair. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't decided to go undercover that day." Olivia looked up at him, her green eyes twinkling. "Oh, I'm sure the universe would have found another way to knock some sense into you," she teased. "But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Every part of our journey has led us here, and I wouldn't change a thing." Robert nodded, feeling a profound sense of contentment. "Neither would I," he agreed. Later that morning, as they made their way through the hotel lobby, Robert and Olivia were greeted warmly by staff and guests alike. Thomas, now the head concierge, waved cheerfully from behind the desk. Maria, the housekeeper who had taught Robert the perfect hospital corner, stopped to coo over baby Sophie. As they entered Robert's office for their daily meeting, they were joined by Sarah, now the hotel's general manager, and Richard, who had become one of their strongest allies on the board. "Good morning, everyone," Robert said, settling into his chair with Sophie on his lap. "Let's talk about the upcoming charity gala, shall we?" As the meeting progressed, filled with laughter, creative ideas, and genuine collaboration, Robert was struck by how different this was from the cold, impersonal board meetings of his past. This was a family, working together to create something truly special. After the meeting, Robert and Olivia took a walk through the hotel, Sophie babbling happily in her stroller. They stopped to chat with guests, praised staff members for jobs well done, and basked in the warm, welcoming atmosphere they had created. As they reached the rooftop garden, now a popular spot for both guests and staff to relax, Robert pulled Olivia close. "You know," he said softly, "when I first bought this hotel, I thought success meant profit. What did you think of the story? Leave a comment and a review about this story. If you were moved and enjoyed our work, feel free to help us continue producing. I invite you to click on our link in the first pinned comment. Now, 2 buttons will appear. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and the other to watch other interesting stories. Choose one. Thank you for watching this far. See you soon.